Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. How's the PDC going for everyone? Good? Enjoying it? Good sessions? Cool. Great. Well, thank you for coming to the Commerce Server Mojave session. My name is Tom Schultz. I'm a program manager on the Commerce Server product unit. I specifically manage the technology adoption program for Commerce Server Mojave. Prior to joining the Commerce Server product unit, I spent 7 years in Microsoft Consulting Services, delivering e-commerce platform solutions for customers and partners. My experience with the Commerce Server product goes all the way back to the site server days back in 1998.
Hi, my name is Kerry Havis. I'm a product architect on the Commerce Server product unit. Before I came over to the product unit, I spent time with MCS developing e-commerce solution using Commerce Server. And before that, I worked with JCPenney working on the jcpenney.com website.
Before we get started here, how many people have worked with Commerce Server? Okay, cool. Commerce Server 2007, hand still up. 2002? 2000? Wow. Site Server 3? What? Wow. Merchant Server? Oh, I knew I could get. No, I thought I saw a hand for Merchant Server. Well, thanks for sticking with us. I really appreciate that. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so what our today's agenda? We're going to basically give you a debrief on our Commerce Server roadmap, what we're building, what we're going to be delivering, some pretty exciting stuff. We're going to give you an overview of Commerce Server, quote-unquote, Mojave. That is the code name for our new version of Commerce Server. From there, we're going to drill into do a technical drill down on the Commerce Foundation, the core of the product. We're going to show you some really cool demos of how you write code now against Commerce Server versus the old way. And then after that, we're going to drill down into the SharePoint integration that we've built. So something that everyone's been asking for a couple years now. Hey, when are you guys going to provide Commerce Server and MOS or Commerce Server and WSS integration? So we're going to show you that. We're going to show you a few demos. One thing I want to make sure I note is that all these demos we built within, say, the past, what, 3 to 5 days, I would say. And we built it with the October Community Technical Preview, or CTP release, of Mojave, which is now available to you publicly on the Microsoft Connect site. So we'll show you how to get set up at the end, how you can get access to the bits, as well as we'll take some time to answer any of your questions at the end. But please feel free throughout to ask any questions. If you can, please speak into the microphone so that it's on our recording. Otherwise, we'll just repeat your question. Okay, so a brief recap of Commerce Server. Thank you, so many of you, for working with our many versions over the years. So I'm sure you're very familiar that Commerce Server is not something that's just been invented since 2007 or 2002. Microsoft's been very, very committed to the e-commerce space back to when it first started, back to, say, circa 1995, 1996. When the Amazon.coms of the world first started popping up and e-commerce became a real thing where you could buy goods on the internet. So we started off with just a small little, really a sample type product called Microsoft Merchant Server. And that had a shopping cart that you could use to just basically call an API to add line items to a basket to perform a checkout. We then carried it forward into, say, the 1998 timeframe with Site Server and Site Server Commerce Edition. We added things like reporting and analytics, so the ability to build reports based on what the activity on your site, understand the health of it, understand the activity, understand what consumers are doing on your site. We added things like personalization and membership. We had an LDAP filter so that you could just simply profile your users, provide simple login, that sort of thing. But all along the way, we're studying the market. We're looking at how people build e-commerce sites on the Microsoft stack. We study what those business needs are, and then we bake those down into our plumbing so that you don't have to rewrite, say, a shopping basket or a web part or a checkout every single time you build a new site. So carrying forward into Commerce Server 2000, we added things such as a catalog system. So you had the actual ability then to go in and dynamically define your catalog schema or your taxonomy, define your categories, your pricing strategy, your attributes, perform searches, that sort of thing. 2002, we released Commerce Server 2002 as one of the branded .NET Enterprise servers. And a lot of people don't know this, but Commerce Server 2002 was the first Microsoft server product to have a .NET API. So that's where we saw things, if you've written Commerce Server code, the concept of commerce context.current, .catalog system, .get catalog, .get product. And I got a product and I'm working. We started that back in 2001, 2002. Carrying forward in the August 2006 timeframe, we launched Commerce Server 2007. .NET 2.0 was something that we revved towards, so ASP.NET applications. We added things like business user applications or smart client applications to allow you to manage your marketing, manage your campaigns, manage your discounts, manage your catalog, manage your orders. We added web services that plugged into those core subsystems, catalog, orders, profiles, and marketing, as well as we ship BizTalk adapters that plug into those web services. So that's where we've been. But what have we been doing lately? We get this question all the time. Hey, what are you guys doing? What are you doing there in Commerce Server land? What's been going on? Well, this year, calendar year 2008, we shipped Commerce Server 2007 Service Pack 2. It was the first product, Commerce Server 2007, to logo certify on Windows Server 2008. So with that service pack, we added native support for IIS 7. So integrated pipeline mode, we natively support. We now support .NET 3.5. We support Windows Server 2008, of course. And then this past August and now October, we've released our first two releases of Commerce Server Mojave, Community Technical Preview. So our first preview out to our trusted customers like yourselves to get feedback on what we're building for Mojave. Carrying forward beyond what we've done recently, first quarter of 2009, calendar year 2009, Commerce Server Mojave will be a shipping product. It will be generally available in the Microsoft Fulfillment channel, and you will be able to purchase it. So you're going to see some very exciting stuff from us today on what we're building. In terms of SharePoint integration, the ability to use tools such as SharePoint Designer, Expression Blend, ability to write things like Silverlight on top of Commerce Server. These are things you couldn't do previously very well with Commerce Server. Further out, calendar year 2009, 2010, we'll have another midstream release between our Commerce Server Mojave as well as the next major release of Commerce Server. 2010, 2011 is when we're going to take Commerce Server 2007 and Commerce Server Mojave, and we're going to blender it. We're going to blow the thing up from top to bottom and totally revolutionize the product. So that's what we're committed to, and that comes straight out of Redmond. It's a very high-level commitment. You can count on Commerce Server to be around for a long time. So Commerce Server, where do we fit? It's been a long ride, right? Back to 1995. E-commerce landscape has changed immensely. What are we doing? What are we dealing with today? Well, typically in an e-commerce enterprise, anyone who is selling goods, be it physical or digital goods, you've usually got on the left supply chain. You're usually getting products from, say, a trading partner, a catalog provider. Those things are flowing into your enterprise from trading partners, affiliates, distributors. They usually go into existing systems. Commerce Server hasn't been around that long. Your business have been. You usually go into systems such as a warehouse management system where the inventory is to be filled and shipped out to your home, or SAP system, or a JD ERP system, or a custom merchandising system, be it on maybe a S400. Those things are flowing into your enterprise. And what are you trying to do as a business? Well, you're trying to sell it. Not only are we seeing customers want to sell things on the right there with the traditional consumer e-commerce website, but now there are growing channels where we can sell goods, be it an online gaming channel like an Xbox Live, or in your existing brick and mortar stores via a point of sale device or kiosk, as well as additional methods like, say, a customer service rep. A customer service rep can call up and say, hey, I want to order something. That client will be able to just call the existing business that you built on top of Commerce Server. You have all of this, and we end up with Commerce Server sitting right in the middle of all that. That's a lot of complexity. We've got to pull data from our supply chain, our existing business applications. Perhaps we need to integrate with this line of business applications. We need to send orders in. We need to send catalog updates, inventory updates, as well as we need to sell those not only on the e-commerce site, but across different, maybe a mobile, a Windows mobile phone, or an iPhone. There's a lot of complexity there. It costs a lot to do those sorts of things, let's face it. So what is Mojave? What are we doing to make this easier? So at the core of Mojave is multi-channel application. It's an API that gives you pluggable architecture for those different channels out of the box, a web channel out of the box. If you build commerce server applications today, we've got a really nice feature-rich API, but you got to write your own controls, your own parts, your own server controls. Out of the box, we're going to give you a site, a web channel. We're going to give you a mobile channel, so you can sell things to a Windows mobile phone or an iPhone. And the idea is that these are channels that you can plug or unplug with configuration. You shouldn't have to write a ton of code to do these things. Secondly, we're going to give you that out of the box, that typical business to consumer website out of the box in terms of web parts, ASP.NET parts, traditional things you see in e-commerce. So the ability to browse a catalog, add to a cart. All of that is built on top of our core foundation. It plugs into our core foundation. And by building these things with web parts, they're now scalable designers. I can use tools like Expression Blend. I can use tools like Office SharePoint Designer to skin the UI without disturbing the underlying business logic or plan. Thirdly, we're going to do a little bit better job this time of addressing the business side of the house, the people that really own e-commerce properties, that really drive merchandisers, marketers that really know and understand how to drive sales and how to grow revenue. We've had Commerce Server 2007 business applications. They're smart WinForms applications. But let's face it, a lot of people in enterprises here in IT are using those tools. So wouldn't it be if I could just go in a WYSIWYG fashion, SharePoint fashion in the browser as a merchandiser, simply be able to edit the product, be able to update the prices, be able to publish information from pre-production to production environment. This is the core of what Mojave is. These are major additions we're adding to Commerce Server. So what do you really get with Mojave, Commerce Server Mojave over Commerce Server 2007? As you're here at the PDC, so no doubt you're most likely a developer or a designer. So as a designer, again, now we build based on templates. We have the concept of XLT templates out of the box. We can use tools, again, like Expression Blend, Point, Satellite, just change the UI without having to know a lot of information about the Commerce API. If you're just a core developer and you build business logic all the time, and that's what you love to do, you love to just go and all kinds of business logic for your e-commerce applications. We're giving you a new API. We've heard what you've said. Hey, I have a lot of subject matter expert in each one of these Commerce Server subsystems to know how to do anything. Gary's going to show you we made a really nice uniform API on top of the existing Commerce Server 2007 API. At the same time, we're not taking dependency on one UI. I mentioned the web parts. We're not going to force you now to just write web parts. You can write your own UI, Silverlight UI, or a web UI, or a classic ASP UI, all on top of the same foundation. Now we have this clear separation between the two. As well as with this architecture, what you didn't have with Commerce Server 2007 was the ability to extend our types. So types in Commerce Server 2007, be it a product or a catalog, those are all sealed. If you wanted to add to say, a product, customer reviews as an entity relationship, you couldn't do that. You had to write your own wrapper code, your own business application architecture around that. We're giving you that plumbing, extensible plumbing out of the box. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Carrie now. I'm going to drill into the Commerce Foundation itself.
Okay, thanks, Don. I'd like to talk about is the next generation Commerce Foundation that we're delivering as part of Commerce Server Mojave. So before we can do that, talk a little bit about what we delivered with Server 2007. We delivered a catalog system that enables you to store and manage your catalogs, an order system to store and manage orders, a profile system. We wrapped it all together with marketing that can leverage all three of these components to deliver great marketing. We use SQL Server as BI and reporting service to deliver some great analytics. We get enabled connectivity with various systems using web services and BizTalk adapters. We gave some great IT pros for staging and some great business user tools for managing catalogs, managing marketing, et cetera. And then, of course, we enabled great site development using ASP.NET and Visual Studio. So as we began to think about our next release of Commerce Server, we started to take a good, long, hard look at the pain points that people had in developing sites on Commerce Server 2007. We listened to project managers and developers and began to see some common themes. By far, the biggest pain point that we heard was simply took too long and cost too much to build a site from our out-of-the-box components. So we started drilling down and see what those costs were and what kind of time was being taken and where it was being spent. And there's some of the problems that we found. There's no presentation layer. We release a starter site, but we, at the same time, tell you, yeah, you don't want to use that in production. Our APIs between all our different modules were inconsistent. You could learn one module very well and then be a starter on a new module and have to start all over. So the ramp-up time for learning all of the Commerce Service system was way too long. We had limited business logic between the API and the presentation layer. People had to go in and build their entire business logic infrastructure around our API instead of it being part of our API. And it was difficult to achieve performance because there was no way to batch calls to the back end. Every system was calling the back end by itself, so it was causing a big performance drag, or you had to build your own layer where you batched all the processes together and called the back end and returned it back. And it was also difficult to support multiple presentations. You know, we supported ASP.NET. You could build your own presentation, but every channel, whether it's phone or web, you would have to build from scratch. So we took this feedback and developed a set of API design goals. The first thing we had to concede is that we really needed a new API, one that spanned all the modules and presented a consistent, modern, operation-based interface that worked the same whether you're retrieving catalog information, order information, profile information, or advertisements, or even custom information that you developed yourself. We needed a better out-of-the-box business logic layer. We needed better extensibility. We needed for the presentation to be able to batch operations for a cleaner-looking front end that's fast and efficient. And with increased needs to support phone, web, kiosk, Xbox, you name it, multi-channel support had to be there from the ground up. So we took what we built in Commerce Server and we laid a new API on top of it. It's an operation-based API that provides a consistent, extensible set of operations across all of the modules. Another piece of feedback that we got over and over is customers really wanted SharePoint integration. They wanted to leverage SharePoint site provisioning capabilities, content management, and building blocks approach to constructing sites using web parts. So we built a set of core enabling, commerce-enabling web parts that leveraged our new API and gave customers the building blocks that it was necessary to build a site in SharePoint. So then we took that site and utilized SharePoint. So then we took this one step further and actually built a real production-ready, out-of-the-box, supported SharePoint integrated e-commerce site using those web ports that you can actually install and run and put into production right away. Then we took the site and utilized SharePoint's templating ability to create some commonly used site templates, including a web template, a mobile template, and yeah, we're going to support the iPhone. And a rich template designed to show you how you can take a SharePoint site and make it not look like a SharePoint site. We also anticipate that we're going to have third parties that are going to build new site templates that will enable you to build build a new commerce site fast and efficiently using third-party templates. And of course, some people aren't going to want to use our templates or use our site. They're going to want to build their own site. So they can take the customized web parts and they can customize themselves, build their own web parts, or take our web parts and build their own site. Or they can talk directly to our Foundation API and build their own custom UX from scratch, whether they want to build an ASP.NET site or they want to communicate from Silverlight or things like that. So remembering sometimes painfully the feedback we received about extensibility, when we designed our new API, we established some common extensibility points. A commerce entity is essentially a single business concept, such as a product or catalog. And the commerce entity encapsulates both properties and relationships. It can be extended to include new properties and new relationships. It's supported by metadata that describes the commerce entity and gives you information about the commerce entity that can be retrieved via the API. You can retrieve its property list. You can retrieve its list of relationships. Operations provide the CRUD capabilities on commerce entities.
So create, read, update, delete. The core of what you want to do when you're querying data, when you're working with commerce data.
So as I mentioned before, it's an operation-based API. The basic function of an operation is to perform work on one or more commerce entities. We needed the ability to take these basic operations and extend them, and to extend this response back to the presentation layer. We also wanted these operations to be extendable in a very encapsulated way, so you can take these extensions and actually reuse them in other projects. So we broke up individual operations into discrete operation sequences. New operation sequences can be created that occur before or after out-of-the-box functionality that modifies return data or adds return data retrieved from other sources. Or completely new commerce entities can be created with new operation sequences to encapsulate custom business processes with external systems. So let's talk a little bit about the API message flow. Messages usually start out at a presentation layer. The presentation layer needs some pieces of data from the back end. So it gathers the request up and forms a message out of it. Sends the message to our public API. The public API calls the broker and says, here's a message. The broker looks at the message and determines which operation you're asking for. He then evokes that operation. An operation is a set of operation sequences, so the operation is going to invoke its operation sequences in the order that you've defined. So for example, the first operation sequence is invoked. This operation sequence calls the Commerce Server 2007 backend. Commerce Server 2007 then calls SQL Server, returns data back up, and populates information in your response. However, now you can call another operation sequence and another one. This time it might call a cloud service or some external service within your own network. And another operation sequence, as many as you want to define, and then it goes back up to the line. So a little bit more about commerce entities. A commerce entity, again, is a single generic class that represents all commerce entities. So the way we distinguish different commerce entities is with the concept of a model. A model is what we use to describe a particular kind of commerce entity, like a product. So when we tell it we have a model called a product, we're actually telling it that there are these certain properties that are available in it. And we use metadata to distinguish what those properties are. So in an example query that we have right here, we're actually asking for a product type of commerce entity. And one of the good things about the API is that you can actually tell it which properties you want back. So for efficiency's sake, you're not going to want to retrieve properties that you're not going to use in your UI. So you only ask for the things that you need. The other thing that we need to tell it is which product we want. We could be doing a query where we're asking for more than one product, or we could be asking for a single specific product. So we have a concept of a search criteria where you're allowed to apply a filter to the commerce entity that you're asking for. So we give it an ID, and we call it 1243. The other thing we want to know is what catalog do you want that product from? So we add the catalog ID in AdventureWorks catalog, and then that's all we have to do. We pass it into the operation service agent. He processes it. Potentially, you've overridden some of the processes, and you can actually add your own data into it, and then it returns back.
And that pattern's the same for, right, Carrie, if I was querying for, say, a marketing campaign or a basket or an order, correct?
Yeah, the pattern's all the same, and that's one of the great things about the UI is everything is treated the same. Once you've learned one, you've learned them all.
Okay, the question is, do the operations support the Commerce Server 2007 catalog set join table command where I can join an external table into that? And the answer to that is yes. One thing that we've done with Mojave, one of the tenets of it is what we call feature parity. So anything that you do in Commerce Server 2007, you need to be able to do in the new API with Mojave.
So a little bit more about what makes a commerce entity work. The core of a commerce entity is the concept of a property collection. A property collection is a list of properties that make up that commerce entity. So what this allows us to do is build any kind of particular model that we want based on a commerce entity and a list of properties. And we also give you some basic methods for setting property values and getting property values. So you can take a commerce entity and you can dynamically add properties to it in the back end and return them back up and display them on the screen without actually having to change any of our core classes. Relationships. Relationships are very important in our world. A commerce entity by itself is an island. It can't do anything. So commerce entities almost always relate to other commerce entities. So relationships are a very strong part of what we built. relationships are treated just like any other property. So when you ask for a product and you ask for relationships to that product, you're going to get them back in the property collection. They're just another property. And you can drill down through the classes in order to get to the data below them. The other thing we do is we offer paging support for the relationships, so that if you only want to display, the first 20, the next 20 for a web-based display, then you can do that very easily. The other thing is that they're manipulated exactly the same as a property. So you can go in there and you can go and add to them and dynamically create them as much as you want. And again, they're extensible so that you can create new relationships. We have a lot of relationships out of the box. You can go in and create new ones and define them and extend your system to add them into our system.
So Kerry, could I create like a relationship for, say, customer reviews, like product.customer reviews? Is that something I could do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can create a dynamic commerce entity called customer review, build a relationship to it, add the plumbing in to tell it how to relate.
Okay, great.
So let's start talking a little bit about a demo that we're going to do. What we're going to do is go in there and actually show how to use the API. G. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out Visual Studio 2008. And what I've done is I've kind of pre-built some of a sample site. Some of the stuff that I've already pre-done is I've added some helper classes. I've added some configuration classes. This is all stuff that we actually put out on the Connect site, so you don't actually have to figure out how to build all this. The sample site that we're starting with is out there on the Connect site, and it's a great ASP.NET sample to get you going. But what you'll notice, it doesn't actually do anything yet. So what we want to do is actually get it to start doing stuff. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go in and add some usings. Everything starts with the Microsoft Commerce in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy that so I don't have to write it a bunch of times. Contracts, common, message builders. So we're just going to use some basic usings in there. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we need to create an instance of the operation service agent. So we have something called an operation service agent. Why is operation service agent not there? Why is operation service agent? I missed one here. Broker contracts, message builder. Sorry about that, guys. Missed common. All right, now I have an operation service agent. Scared me for a minute there. So now that's given me an instance into my broker. So the next thing I want to do is I want to actually build a query for a product. So I start out with my query for a product. I'm going to call him Query Builder. And I don't need to give him any arguments. So like I said before, you can actually go in there and tell it the search criteria. So you can tell it which product you want to deal with. You can go in and tell it which catalog. And of course, you can go in and tell it what properties that you want to add.
So here's a really great improvement, right, Kerry? I mean, before, a lot of questions we get is, well, when I query for a product, does it pull back all the properties? What if I wanted like a lazy instantiation where I only want two properties off the catalog, off the product, I should say? So basically what we're doing here, right, is saying, just give me ID and display name. That's all I want. I'll tell the runtime what I want. I won't let it tell me this is what you're getting back.
And that's one of the feedbacks that we got, is that it actually costs you a lot to retrieve a piece of data back from a back-end system that you're actually not ever going to use. And of course, we can also give the action, instead of using the helper class, we can actually give it the actual name of the property that we want instead of using the helper class. So the next thing we want to do is we want to actually call our operations service that we just built. We previously built a little utility class that actually creates a request context for us. A request context is just basic information that we need to pass into the back end to tell it who we are. And then, of course, once we've done that, we actually need to handle the response. So we're going to build a response handler. And we're going to cast it because we could actually have multiple different responses. So we want to tell it what kind that we're going to be talking to so that we have the right properties available. So then once we have that, we know we're going to get a product back, so we can go ahead and create one of our helper product classes. And one of the things that we allow you to do is actually, in your constructor of the helper product class, you can actually cast it directly in there and then turn it into a product, so that gives you your strong typing. And now we'll just do some basic response.write, so we'll actually see what we're actually going to be displaying. We'll do a little image here. Actually, we need to go ahead and add our path in there. Product.properties. And of course, we previously asked for the image file name, so we're going to use that as part of our structure. And then, of course, we need to close it. And we'll just add a break so that we can see it. Now we'll add another one. We're going to add just a very simple one. We're going to ask for the list price. And of course, we want to be able to break as well. And last thing we're going to add is just to show you different ways that you can actually get to the data. We're going to show the display name. Now, what are the odds this will actually run the first time? I did that earlier too. And it didn't turn out well. Okay, let's give that a try. We got some errors. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Search criteria. All right. So it doesn't look like it recognizes our particular property that we're asking for. So we'll change that up a little bit. And at least we get a successful build out of it.
So in this case, I really didn't have to know like all those intimate knowledge about the Commerce Server catalog system, right? I just had to know the calling pattern. Create a request for a product, call process request, get a response back. It's not very hard to do.
So we'll let it spin up here a little bit because it's spinning up the Commerce Server system in the back end.
So Carrie, if I wanted to do in one request, could I also get a basket and say a campaign? How would I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can batch up requests as many as you need to. So now we've built a very simple system that shows our product, a list price, and a display name. So the next thing we want to do is we have this concept of batching operations and be able to add related properties in there at the same time. So what we want to do is now add a little bit to this. What we're going to do is Commerce Server has a concept of variance. So what we actually really want to do is we want to retrieve the variance for this product as well. So what we can do is add what we call a related item query, which means that we know we have this relationship. So what we want to do is we want to tell it very quickly to add some additional information. And then once we build that, we actually have to add it. And what we do is we add it to our same request. And so we're actually going to call twice at the same time, one time, and actually retrieve two pieces of information. We're going to retrieve the basic product information and all of its variants. So just to prove that we're doing that, what we're actually going to do is go through down here and actually write out all of the variants that we actually got back.
So we could do this for any relationship. We could do this for cross-sells, upsells, anything. And that data could be back-ended, not necessarily in the Commerce Server catalog. It could be back-ended in the Commerce Server profile system. It could be back-ended in some other system. But then it rolls up to the UI as just a generic relationship type. It's enumerable, as you can see Carrie's writing up here. So we can bind this, just simply bind this to our UI. As a UI developer, I don't know, nor do I care where that data is stored. That's all being driven by our core API, by our foundation.
So what I'm actually doing right here is I'm actually going through and walking through the relationships that were returned in my variant relationship, and then pulling out the actual commerce entity that represents and displaying its display name. And I'm going to put another one in here, and I'll do that. I'm going to leave a little space there for later. So now, what we're going to try to prove is that not only did we retrieve a basic product, but we're actually going to retrieve all of that product's variants as well, which we didn't do. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Relationship. I have to tell it which relationship that I actually want.
Aha.
So as part of knowing the fact that I want a relationship, I have to know which one it is. So now if we run it, we actually see that I've got products, I've got my price, and then I've got a list of variants that I've also returned. So now we're going to take that just one step further, where one of the things we can do, besides adding related operations, we can actually add related operations to related operations. So what that does is gives us leveling beyond just a simple, we can relate to one thing, but we can relate to the thing we related to. So what I'm going to add is an inventory query, because if you have variants and you have inventory, that you're probably going to want to know about them. So I'm going to ask for the inventory items, which is another relationship on the relationship I had. So it's a relationship on the variants themselves. And again, I got to tell it which catalog that I want to talk to. In this case, it's the AdventureWorks inventory. And then, because now that I've built it, I actually have to go in and tell it that I want it added to my related operations. So what I've done is now I'm going to get products, I'm going to get variants, I'm going to get inventory on those variants. So what I'm going to do here now is that now that I have this is I'm going to actually pull down the relationship list that I had, that I've returned, and these are in this case inventory items. And they're part of my variant relation. I'm inside that for each loop. So now I have for each one of those, I can retrieve the list of inventory items. Now bear in mind, the only time I ever went to the back end is when I processed a response. Everything I'm doing right here is on the front end. And I'm going to cast this as a relationship list. So then I'm going to cast this into a commerce server, commerce entity, so that I can talk to it. Inventory. And because I know that I always only get one inventory item back in this case, I can just go in and quickly reference just that one. And then I'm just going to do a response.write where I tell it that my online quantity is inventory item quantity. So now, what I should see is that not only do I have my products and my variants, but I also have a quantity available for each one of those variants. So I don't have any inventory items back. So let's see what we did here. Relationship inventory items. Variant relationship. Target properties. Model. Operations. Let's just move this before this. Probably doesn't matter, but let's give that a try. We can't do that. In this case, I don't have any inventory items.
Sorry.
So what I think we're going to do is move on from here. A little demo gods were not speaking to us on that one.
Every demo today has probably gone flawlessly, right? It's the first one.
Let's just make sure real quick that I did this correctly here, just so I don't go on. Okay, so we're going to move on from there. We'll comment that stuff out for now. Make sure that still runs. Nope. Comment that one out too. Okay, back to where we were. Okay, so what we're going to do now is reach that one. Set that aside for a little bit, and we're going to go in and talk about the next stage that we want to do, which is we have this concept of an operation sequence. And the operation sequence is a encapsulated component that's part of an operation. And what that allows us to do is build discrete reusable components that can be plugged into any operation. Every call into the Commerce Server API goes through an operation. So any call, you can either put an operation sequence before or after the out-of-box components or build completely new operations. So I've already pre-built part of one right here. So the way that operation sequences work is they all inherit from a pipeline component, and they all override basic properties. You've got execute query, you've got execute create, you've got all of your basic CRUD functionality that you can override. So I've already also added some of the usings in there so we can see what Microsoft components we're actually using. So what we want to do now is we've actually decided that we're gonna put this in there after all the out-of-the-box functionality is done. So we're going to assume right now that we've already gone through and built up the response for a product using the existing call that we did previously. So what we can do now is we can actually reference that response. So what we're trying to do is we're actually going to go down and resolve our variance. So we've already assumed that we actually have loaded our response. We have a list of variants. So what we want to do now is actually walk through them. And we can actually go in and actually, how are we doing on time, Tom?
We're running a little late.
All right. So what we can do here is we can actually go in and take any pipeline component, create a new one, override it, go in and change the query and actually interpret the responses that we're getting back, and then add to it. We can actually make our own calls to back-end systems. We can dynamically add data to the commerce entity, add new properties, add new relationships, and return it back up. So from a front-end perspective, when you make the call, you don't know that any custom work is being done, but when you get it back, you've actually got the custom data. So we're not going to go through that and actually build it and run it right now because we're running short of time. But that's basically what you would have to do to build it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn it back to Tom, who's going to talk more about our SharePoint integration.
Okay, great. And it's worth mentioning that we'll post all of these samples on the Microsoft Connect site. So if you want to pull the code down and play around with it, anything we didn't get through today, feel free to do that. I'll give you instructions on that. Okay, so the SharePoint integration we talked about. What are we doing to finally bring Commerce Server and SharePoint together? So basically, again, we wanted to give you a higher level development experience building an e-commerce site. Instead of having to roll your own controls, here are some web parts. It's worth noting that we're going to ship the full source for our web parts in an SDK when we release the product. So if you want to see how we built our web parts, you want to modify them, rip them, change them, follow our pattern, you're free to do that, totally free to do that. But all of these web parts call down into that Commerce Foundation API that you just saw Carrie writing against. So these web parts are just building up the operation request, calling process request, getting the response back, and then binding it to themselves. So out of the box, we're going to have 29 different web parts, functionally categorized across all the Commerce Server subsystems: catalog, orders, profiles, marketing, search, etc. And these are really the core ingredients for building a B2C site. In a few moments here, I'm going to show you a demo. We're going to put some of these together, and we're going to put together a site in a pretty short amount of time. So again, these are ASP.NET web parts. And one of the things that we, again, with respect to performance that we looked at was, well, hey, with the web parts, right, we could build, let's say, we could really optimize our performance by marshaling all of those requests for all those constituent web parts on a web page into one process request. So call down into the API the runtime wants, get the data back, bind it, versus, say, 5 or 6 chatty calls. And those will just host, right, within either MOS or WSS. You can drop them in, and they just plain work against the core API. There's really, as you'll see, hardly any configuration at all. So a concrete example of what I'm talking about where we want to maximize performance. Let's look at, say, a typical product detail page, and this is one of our Commerce Server customers' product detail page. You can see that they want to go and get, say, the product image. They want to get, of course, the product properties. They might want to get customer reviews. They might want to get the variants. So we saw where Carrie actually wrote that related operation for the variants instead of having to perform a secondary get to get the variants. As well as we might want to get cross-sells. Those cross-sell products could be a relationship that hangs off of our product commerce entity. Or we might even want to add, say, a mini shopping cart up on the upper right there. All of that can be batched up into one call, into one process request, maximize performance on our website. So how are we doing this? How did we facilitate this from a SharePoint perspective? Well, with respect to, say, the products, the catalogs, we've created what we call like a headless product provider web part. So headless in the sense of it has no UI. Its job is basically to go and get the properties, go and get the items that you tell it to get, that you design it to get, and come back, connect over the web part connections to the constituent web parts that you'll see, and basically give it its data. So what we're doing to allow you to be able to change the UI on the front, to change the styling and how it renders, again, we're getting a commerce entity back in our response, which can be serialized as XML. And then we have XSLT templates out of the box for each one of the web parts. So you can simply go in and just change the XSLT template. It does a transform on the XML, and then there's your UI. And we'll see this here in a few moments. So a little bit more about that. The actual XSLT templates themselves are just basically out of the box stored in doc libraries within your SharePoint site. So if you wanted to allow a business user to go in and upload an XSLT, or if you wanted to just modify it within SharePoint Designer, you can totally do that. You don't have to write a separate tool to do that. And again, that just transforms the XML and renders the API. So I can, on a Commerce Server project, really separate out my UI developers and say, look, UI developers, write XSLT, create web parts, or extend web parts. Don't worry about the plumbing. We've got that covered over here in the middle tier side of the house. As well as, say, for things like specifically like checkout. Every checkout on an e-commerce site could be a little bit different, right? Some customers want to have just, the traditional basket, billing, shipping, payment, confirmation. Or maybe I want to double up billing and shipping in the same stage. Or maybe I want to have an express checkout for customers that have already registered and stored their profile credit cards. So we built this infrastructure to allow you to be able, as a developer, to configure the stages yourself using a SharePoint list and drive what user controls and what pages get loaded as part of that process, as part of that checkout. And we're going to show that to you here in just a few moments. Lastly, and we're going to show you an example here in the demo as well, in terms of rendering the actual navigation on a site, right? SharePoint's great out of the box in that it has its own sitemap provider. So I add pages to my site, I design it, I add lists, and it's just simply popping up within the breadcrumbs, within the sitemap. All the controls just render. But on an e-commerce site, I also have this concept of guided navigation, right? So the products in my product catalog, the categories, that needs to be visible as well. What do I do then as a developer? How do I make this work within SharePoint? So what we've done is we've built a sitemap provider that allows you to combine the SharePoint sitemap and, say, the Commerce Server product category hierarchy into one sitemap, or just render the Commerce Server sitemap itself and bring that together all into one sitemap provider. Fuse those two things together, if you will. Lastly, we looked at okay, what can we do for authentication and user profiles? So how many people are familiar with the Henry Winkler Commerce Server white paper for Henry's a great guy. He figured out here's how you wire up the web config to make the thing work, to make a Commerce Server app run within SharePoint. Well, now we have this tool out of the box called Portal Config that basically does that similar type of wiring for you. It wires up the SharePoint web parts. It sets up the user profile membership stuff. It wires it all together. So our path going forward for profiling is to still use Commerce Server for the profile membership. Still use our ASP.NET membership provider that we have with Commerce Server 2007. Out of the box with our default site, we'll have a login.aspx that uses forms-based authentication, and that's exactly how it will work. So enough PowerPoints already. Let's look at how we actually build some stuff with these web parts out of the box. So first of all, just a little background of what I did here. What I did to set this up. I created on my machine just a simple, just a simple MOS publishing portal application. I just created that. Not a big deal, right? Just created that. I then unpupped the sample site pup that Carrie was working with writing code against. It's available on our Microsoft Connect site. I unpupped that. I then ran that portal config tool I was talking about, which basically said, okay, let's wire up this MOS application to use the web parts. Okay, so what it did is it installed our web parts and it activated the features within that SharePoint application, so that's now available to me to use. Okay, so that's the basis of what I have. And all of these steps are going to be covered in a nice sample on our Microsoft Connect site. So if I'm building, I'm getting started, right? I've got the core foundation laid down. I want to build a site with the web parts. Let's see you do it, right? What do I have to do? Well, the first thing I might want to do, right, is create, let's say, a category page, right? Category. And these are all used web parts, so I'm going to do a blank web part page, just the standard stuff here. All right, so on this page, if I hit Add Web Part, we scroll down. Here you go. Microsoft, in this case, we still have Commerce Server 2007. Here are all those web parts that I mentioned on a previous slide. So on a category page, I basically want to just dump out all of the products, right? So let's add the product query web part. Okay, so now I just need to configure him, right? So let's modify the SharePoint web part. And I mentioned those XSLT templates out of the box. So out of the box, I've got templates out of the box that just plain work. In this case, we call this sample product query 3. And this is just being read from a SharePoint list. And then it's just XSLT that does a transform. Now the properties that I want to pass into that XSLT, I need to tell the web part itself what I want passed into it. So this builder right here basically reads, again through the foundational API, all the properties available to me in my metadata, what's available to me in my catalog. So in this case, I'm just going to expose all the properties to this web part. Let's scroll down just a little bit further. Okay, and then within here we have some settings called commerce settings. And we mentioned the notion in the foundational API of a channel, how you could have a separate channel for web, for mobile, for point of sale, that sort of thing. In this case, we're just going to use the default channel. And I'm going to use that same AdventureWorks catalog that Carrie used. And that actual catalog itself, as you can see, it has a departments category at the top. So I'm just going to dump the departments products just to get started here. So let's go from departments right here. And again, we support paging, as Carrie mentioned, from our core API. So I'm going to page, say, 25 at a time. I'm going to include some of those relationships that we talked about earlier. I'm going to include variants on this call as well. So let's just hit OK. Well, looks like I forgot something. No, I didn't. SharePoint likes to do that sometimes. Have you guys ever noticed that? We get some really funky things that go on there. But let's check in our page right here to SharePoint. Okay, bam! I've got my product query web part. It's wired up to that core API. It's rendering the UI based on that XSLT. So the next thing I might want to do, right, is let's say I can page through those products. So that didn't require any code. That just worked, right? I didn't have to do anything to get to work. Just configure it. So next thing I'd want to build, right, is a, say, product page. Okay, so I've already created just a blank product page here. It has no parts on it, as you can see. So let's edit the page. And I talked about that product provider web part, that headless web part that you can use to marshal all your requests through. Well, we'll need to add that part to our page. So let's scroll down and find that guy. Product provider web part. Okay, we've added him. Okay, so we need to configure him. So let's modify him. We'll go down to Commerce Settings. Okay, default channel again. And by default, we want AdventureWorks Catalog. And then when we're called, when we're passed into, or how do we know what product to get? Well, we can configure what query string parameters that we want to pull. So product ID, catalog name, category, etc. And I want to include any variants that are on this product. I want to include the variant relationships on that. So let's hit OK. OK, so that just wired up just the core to go and get me the data. Let's add some actual visuals here. So typically on a product detail page, I would have, let's say, an image. So we have an image viewer web part. We add the image viewer web part. First thing I need to do, right, is connect it to that product provider web part so that it can drive it and give it the data. So we go to Connections, Get Product Provider from Product Provider Web Part. Next thing I need to do is just simply configure it. So by default, I want a 100 by 100 image. I've already uploaded the images to the Publishing Images folder within my site. Now I need to tell it what attribute in my catalog it has the image file name. So we'll just pick image file name here. And let's just do OK. And bam, there's our boot. OK, so that got it off the product provider web part. Well, we might want to also show a little bit more detail about the product. So we have a couple different things there. We have just a simple property list part. We have an XSLT property list part. I'm going to use a simple property list web part. And again, I need to connect him to the product provider web part. All right, now we need to do just a little bit more configuration. What properties do I want it to show? So I launched a property builder. Okay, and now notice I can specify properties either for all product definitions or particular ones. In this case, I'm just going to do for all. I'll take, let's say, display name. Let's take description. And let's take list price on the actual products. And then on the variants themselves, let's just take display name and list price. Let's hit OK. OK, well, let's scroll down the bottom and hit OK on this guy. OK, there's our properties that are displayed. Again, that's just coming off that product provider web part. Now, I might want to add an add to cart web part, right? Because I need to be able to buy stuff. So let's add an add to cart web part. Scroll down. Add to cart web part. We add this guy to the mix. Same thing. He needs to be connected to that product provider web part. So let's connect him. OK, he's good to go. Let's check our page in. He's checked in. Great. OK, we've now just got a very, very simple UI that's wired into the core API. Let's add this to our basket. Add to cart. OK, I need a cart page now. Oh, God. What do I need to do for that? All right, let's go back to category page, right? Let's modify this guy. And as I showed in that one example, a lot of times a lot of our customers like to have a mini cart. So I'm going to add a mini cart on this page. Mini cart web part. Okay, I have to do just a small bit of configuration on him in that I need to tell him what cart to go get. So if you've done Commerce Server 2007 or 2000, you know that by default, the default basket is named default. So let's hit OK. OK, there's our little mini shopping cart. Very, very simple, right? Now I could go in SharePoint Designer if I wanted to, and I could actually go down and in the Commerce Server templates that portal config tool installs into your SharePoint site, I could go down in the actual sample mini cart itself, and I can change the transform, which would change the UI on the fly. So as you can see here, the XSL parameters right here, those are the properties that get passed into me on the web part. Okay? I just simply get those parameters, and then I use them within my transform on the XML to render my UI. So I can create like 25 different XSLTs if I wanted for different times of the year, for different seasons, for different customers, however they wanted to render. And then we just simply change the XSLT template on the web part itself. That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. The question is, are you guys going to provide an XSLT debugging environment? And that is something actually Carrie and I talked about beforehand. Right now we're at CTP. We're taking a lot of feedback like that. That's something I can tell you I'd like to see us do. It's not something we have planned right now, but at the same time, we're going to be opening up all the source again in the SDK. And we're going to be putting a lot more effort into the community, which is something we haven't done a great job of in the past, frankly. So things like www.commerceserver.net, you're going to see those things in the near-term future become resources like www.asp.net or silverlight.net, where if we have add-on tool solutions like that our customers want to post up there and you can rip and use, or we harvest into the next major release of Commerce Server, we're going to start doing those things. So short answer is we don't have it planned, but we're very wary of it and we understand it. We have interim releases coming later, 2009, 2010. This plumbing, I want to make sure that I point out, this foundational API, this footprint, this is what we're carrying forward in the next major release of Commerce Server out in 2010, 2011. So if you're writing Mojave source code using this process request, commerce entity, and all that, your upgrade path is going to be much, much easier come 2010, 2011.
And XSL has been around a long time, so there's lots of good tools out there that allow you to do interactive debugging and interactive development of XSLT.
And we've been in conversation a lot with the Office 14 SharePoint guys, and XSLT is a pretty heavy investment on their side. They're building a lot of those things. And if you think about it, we're just writing within the MOS container. So a lot of these tool sets that they build, we'll be able to reap the benefits later. We're sticking to our bread and butter, which is pure e-commerce, but giving you this foundation out of the box.
I think we got a question over here.
Yeah, maybe you talked about this earlier, but I came in a little late. What about integration with RMS?
With our question is, what about integration with RMS and retail management system? I'm personally not familiar with. Is that a Microsoft product?
Yeah, it's a Microsoft product. It's your POS product.
We don't have any built-in integration, but with our integration extensibility points, it's very easy to build. So we expect to be building integrations with a lot of different commerce systems in the future. Right now, we're getting our foundation API built, and we're getting our integration points built. And then from there, we'll actually be reaching out to all these other different commerce and even non-commerce products to build integration for them.
Okay, it's just you don't want to have two separate databases. So, because you can have people selling, both via the, in-store, and you can have at the same time people ordering online.
And of course, the good thing about the way our providers work within the operation sequences, you don't necessarily have to store things in Commerce Server. From the API perspective, it doesn't care where you get the information from. You can go get them from Commerce Server, you can get it from CRM, you can get them from SharePoint list items, you could actually reach out to the cloud, you could reach out to RMS. It doesn't matter to us from a display perspective or an API perspective where the data comes from. That's just a provider issue. It's up to developers to build providers to all these different systems.
Yeah, I can give you an example. I have, again, I run the Mojave TAP program. I have two customers that they basically don't use our core Commerce Server order system. They call directly back to SAP because it drives all the order discounting and expressions and everything. But they've built code using this extensibility model that just simply calls back there, gets the order information, rolls it back. And again, on the front side of it, as a UI developer, I don't know nor do I care where that information's coming. If it's coming from Oracle or SAP or Commerce Server, but I can build that infrastructure now into one business model to pull it back.
I was just kind of hoping maybe, you guys are brother and sister, basically.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good point.
Make it that simple for your CPQ.
Absolutely, and one thing is we have to make this investment in the core foundation now to enable those sorts of scenarios longer term. Sorry, you had a question back.
Steps here of creating your product category, your product page. How do you envision rolling that out from dev to test to staging to production?
That's a good question. So the question is, I've created some pages. How do I envision basically moving them from different environments, dev, pre-production stage, that sort of thing? So really, the path forward, what we're looking at right now is you can compile, like say, your own site as a WSP with all those parts. Use the MOS content publishing stuff to roll it out. Those are scenarios. Again, we're working with CTP bits now. A lot of the deployment guidance we're going to have coming here close to RTM, but a lot of those things are being spec'd out right now. So I'd be happy to follow up with you offline with some more detailed information from our deployment team. So, go ahead.
Two things. I'm actually using the template libraries.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you're putting the templates in the document library.
Mm-hmm.
What about multi-language support if the base portal has multiple language variants?
Right. Very good question. The question was, I noticed that you're putting these things in doc libraries. What about multilingual situations where I need to support like English United States and Espanol and French Canadian? How is that going to all work with the web parts? So our guidance right now is basically to use variations from the MOS side, basically vary on culture, and then you have a separate page basically wired up for each culture that drives down into, let's say, the catalog.
And the second question, related to search, are you connecting PDC to the catalog?
Okay, so the second question is, with respect to search, are we plugging in the business data catalog against the commerce server catalog? Is that fair to say?
Are you indexing the
Yeah, the answer is no. We're actually calling directly through our own Commerce API in order to retrieve products into SharePoint. So no, they're not being pulled into SharePoint themselves. We're not copying the data over.
If I use the top search,
Right.
point search, that won't get anything from my product in that e-commerce search.
Well, right now by default, what you see on this is just the default, MOS search. We're going to actually the search web parts, that functionality is shipping in our next CTP release.
So what we provide is our own search box, which actually will go back and actually consolidate not only SharePoint content data, but also our own product data and return it back.
Okay.
And it also has a provider model so that you can connect to other search engines such as FAST.
It's very, very good questions. If you don't mind, if you could hold that, we're already running over time. I just want to get through the rest of the demo real quick. I'd be happy to answer offline. So from here, I need to implement my shopping cart. All right. So let's add the shopping cart page here. Let's go in, and of course, I need a shopping basket, shopping cart web part. Excuse me. Let's add that guy to the page. You can modify him. Again, I have a sample XSLT template. Now, when I click, let's say, continue shopping, what page do I want to come up? Well, I'll take us back to the category page. And then if I go to the checkout, what page do I want to go to? Well, I want to go to the checkout page. What line items do I want to display in the basket? So these are coming off the order system down through the core API. So let's show the image. Let's show the description. Let's show the name. Let's move that guy up. And let's see here. How about the availability, our quantity, and our total? Is it okay? Scroll down a bit. I believe that's all I need to configure. Is it okay? Okay, bam. This is a little ugly right now, and something, if you've done SharePoint stuff, you know it does some really strange things. This is very basic, right? At this point, we're just giving you the nuts and bolts. It's not supposed to look pretty. But there's your checkout web part, right? So next thing I want to do, right, is checkout. I go to checkout. Well, I got to build my checkout page. So let's add the checkout stuff. Well, looks like I got the wrong... Sorry, I've got the wrong type of template there. Let's get rid of that. Let's create a page, call it checkout. Make sure it's a web part page, so that'll be easier. Add that guy. Okay, so on our checkout page, right, we just need to add our checkout control. So checkout web part. All right, so we need to specify, again, that checkout flow source I talked about. Okay, and previously what I did is I went in and I actually created a list using the template, our template for checkout flow. And as you can see, it just simply has the steps, the title, and then it has the path of the ASCX that you want to load within that particular step. And then any properties that I need to pass into that user control, I specify on the control properties. That's really it. That's all there is to it. So I'm going to pick on the flow source, Mojave default checkout steps. And then on my commerce settings, I don't really have anything to set there. Let's hit OK. All right, so let's check this guy in. and SharePoint says, hey, you got to fill this out. So let's do John Doe, 123 Main, Los Angeles, California, 234. Okay, let's go back up and check him in now. Okay, he's checked in. So you can see he moved us forward to shipping. So John Doe, 123 Main, Los Angeles, California, 1234. I'm sorry, yeah, so now we're on the billing step, right? Just driven by that. John Doe, 123 Main, LA, California, 234. If you've done any kind of e-commerce development, you know you have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. We're good. 2, 3, 4. Let's do next. Okay, so we're now at that submit order. Let's do submit order. Oh, wow, I forgot my order confirmation. I need to display that. Well, do we have a web part for that? Yes, we do. So what is it, really? It's just order details, right? Let's add order details. Now we need to just do some minor configuration on him. So we've got our template out of the box that you can customize. Our commerce settings is all the same. URL should be default. Let's hit OK. OK, there it is. There are our web parts. Okay, so in like 10 minutes, I just assembled a Moz site with just I can display our products, I can do checkout. All right, so what about this sitemap provider? So let's go back to our category page. Again, I said, wouldn't it be cool, like here's the default Moz sitemap, right? Which just dumps out the pages that I have already created. What if I want to also include these departments, right? I wanted to include this for my catalog and aggregate that together. So what I can do there is I can go in the actual master page. In this case, it's blueband.master. And I am going to cheat here for time's sake here. And I'm going to copy the sitemap data source that we've already wired up with that tool, portal config. So you can see here's the default one. Let's comment him out. Okay. Let's add that guy there. So here you go. I just wired him up. I'm going to give him a unique ID. Let's do 865. Let's update the one up here. 865. I'm going to save him. Okay, let's go back. Let's rerun the page. Bam, there you go. I just added, there you go. There are the departments right there. The plug right in. And it's aggregated together with my existing SharePoint sitemap. Okay, so now let's see if we can make it actually drive this control over here. So let's modify the product query web part. Okay, so we have, and I forget, let's do this here, harnesses. So we have cat as our catalog and category as that one. So let's mess with him. Category. And then I want to just simply get rid of this guy right here. Let's hit OK. Sometimes I need to check in. There we go. Boots. There are boots. There are pants. Now that's wired up, the other.
All right, short of time.
All right, so we're pretty much out of time, and really apologize. We've ran late. So everything we built, again, was with the October CTP bits. If you want to get access to them, you can check the connect.microsoft.com site. Our Commerce Server site is appended there. You do have to accept the end-user license agreement. If you have any issues with that, please send an email either to csid@microsoft.com or myself, b-tschul@microsoft.com, and we'll get those bits in your hands. Again, in the coming weeks, we're going to have more samples. We're going to post the stuff that we have out there. We'll have another CTP release coming here this fall in November. You also check our blog. We're going to be a lot more active on our blog on updating with code samples and how-tos and what we're doing. So if we have any more time, again, pull it down. If there are any questions, make sure you fill out your eval. And I think we have just a few minutes to take a couple questions. Yeah, sorry.
One more back.
That one? There you go. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Do we have hands-on labs about this?
Since our CTP just released, like about 8 days ago, we haven't built any hands-on labs here. But on our Connect site, we're posting samples, how-tos, a lot of things you saw Carrie do, a lot of things that I did as well. We're going to have actual like time bomb virtual PC images for some of the CTP releases as well that you can pull down and basically play with the new API. Go ahead. Okay, the question is, are there any changes to the Commerce Server order processing pipeline system and direct mail, which also uses the same pipeline system? That all remains the same. So when, we haven't broken that yet. Obviously, it is COM-based and COM interop, that sort of thing. You can still use those things. We probably won't address nuking that thing until the next major release of Commerce Server, 2010, 2011. Any other questions?
How easy is it to enhance the user experience? I understand that this is very simple to build and you can customize the loop. But if I wanted to add, for example, AJAX capability and things like that, how would I go about that?
That's a good question. So the question is, if I, as far as usability goes, the UI side of things, what if I wanted to build an AJAX front end to it? So the short answer to that is that the service endpoints that we have in this release with Mojave, the ability to query those things, we're not exposing those out externally. But at the same time, you could write your own, say, WCF or straight ASMX wrapper that simply instantiates, builds those queries up, calls process request, and then return back the types to the client side. So it's pretty much for right now the standard experience that, like you'd have with Commerce Server 2007, where you would have to write a wrapper around what we have. We are looking at things like JSON support of our services, RESTful services, that sort of thing. I'm not going to make any promises of when we'll have that, but those are things that we recognize that you really need if you want to build a rich internet application. Any other questions? Okay, great. And we'll take. Thank you very much for coming. We'll take any other questions or contact information. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.